We have a packed agenda tonight after the first weekend of Premier League football. Safe to say, I think Scarlet is probably feeling slightly happier than I am right now. And I'm sure lots of you who've joined us over from Anfield Index will have some big questions to ask of the Liverpool recruitment team. But look, first and foremost, we're going to talk through the results, and then we will move on, of course, to the final week of the transfer window. But first up, Scarlett, just tell me, what's your overarching feeling? Are there any trends that you can pull out from the Premier League weekend?
So yeah, I mean, look, Lola, you've joined me obviously a little late with your Anfield Index background. I don't know how to get one of those, but what I was just discussing here was the fact that what I've extrapolated from the weekend was Arsenal's apparent ease. I mean, as I said to these guys, lads, it's Coventry, but I think actually that ties into my biggest takeaway from the Premier League weekend, and that is that so many teams are under so much construction. I remember this descriptor being used to talk about an Arsenal-Liverpool game at Anfield in about 2014, when Arsenal were wearing their purple kit and Liverpool were newly under the management of Brendan Rodgers. And I think it just feels quite overwhelmingly like a lot of teams, a lot of big players in this league haven't taken their final shape yet. What do you make of that assessment?
I think you're absolutely spot on. I think it's a phony war. Hi, Jordan. Hi, Horace. Jordan, got to keep the branding on point for this channel. So this is the EPL channel. If you want to watch with the red background, come over to Anfield Index anytime. You'll see me there many, many times. But look, I agree with you, Scarlett. It is a phony war at this stage. Lots and lots of teams don't seem like they've taken shape, don't seem settled in their identities, in what it is that they're trying to do and how it is that they're trying to play, mainly because of personnel. And to some extent, I'm willing to be understanding about that. It has been a World Cup summer, and that does obviously set back transfer plans. It's been a weird transfer market. There've been there've been sagas, but just like there always are. But I suppose, if I'm just to wear my Liverpool hat for a moment, I actually don't think it has to be a phony war. Just because everybody else hasn't sorted their shit out doesn't mean that you have to delay your own decisions. But I think you really saw that this weekend. The most settled teams are the teams that have done the best so far, apart from maybe with the exception of Ipswich, who've signed lots of new players. But it can go the other way, as you saw with Sunderland last season. So yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on to observe that there has been a lot of churn. And that across
Lola,
the league,
I interrupt this broadcast to tell you that Fulham have equalised against Chelsea.
Yay!
Which is good news, I think, for everyone in this chat, guys. Josh King has got a 23rd minute equaliser. I'm just looking at BBC Sport to see if I can find a description of that goal.
All Red Runner says King has just smacked in an absolute belter.
Okay, interestingly, I'm seeing that it was a Robert Sanchez mistake, which makes it even better, guys. Yes, hit the like button and subscribe. It greatly helps the channel. Thank you. You'll never walk alone, William Farrell. Thank you.
Thank you, William.
Lola,
but yeah, I looked across the league, but I think it was most stark for Aston Villa and Liverpool, the extent to which both teams looked weaker on paper than they were last season. And I think you can always make arguments, hypothetical arguments based on preseason performances and based on young players and returning players from injury. But I think Liverpool and Aston Villa were both testament to the kind of hypothesis that you need Premier League experience and you need partnerships and you need a band of brothers that know each other and want to fight for each other, because otherwise when the chips get down, you look around you and you don't recognize the guy to your left and the guy to your right is a youth team player. And that's why you saw games getting out of hand. Now, in Liverpool's case, one of the big positives that I can take from that game is that we didn't lose and we were able to come back. But from Aston Villa's perspective, I think one of the main reasons why they weren't able to come back is because they're just, totally unsettled and dejected. And one bad thing has to happen to confirm that bias of, oh, we're not actually very good.
Well, Lola, interestingly, if we look at the lineups for this Fulham and Chelsea game, which is happening right now, to some extent, Fulham are fairly settled, apart from the fact that now they have a new manager, and of course, they've lost Jimenez and they've lost other key players, and they're replaced by Palacios and Garcia, who've gone straight into the starting lineup. If we look at Chelsea, they've actually tried to integrate a lot of their new players. So they've got Lacroix in at centre back, and they've also got Morgan Rogers starting up front as well. And oddly, well, it depends how odd you think it is, there is no place for Enzo Fernandez. So I think Chelsea are a team who have a lot of question marks over them as well. And we'll see how this goes. I mean, it is a London derby to start with. I'm glad that Fulham have got something to say for themselves in this game, because otherwise it was going to be a slightly difficult live stream to be reporting on Chelsea winning so early in the season. But when you speak to the construction, I think it's quite interesting, because obviously continuity is important if you're good. But the flip side of that continuity is that Tottenham were absolutely rubbish in a way that we've seen from them so many times. And I think that's part of what made it so funny over the weekend, the deja vu of watching Man United and Tottenham lose. And of course, United were mauled by the Tigers, which in and of itself would have been enough to make me happy for a while. I was going to do that, Lola. I didn't. I'm not sure if our watchers would have enjoyed that. But listen, I want to come to the comments for a moment before we move on. Lola, I know we've got various reactions to talk about and some transfer news. Horace Brittle says Gakpo could be the best winger in the Premier League, a different club in a different system. I don't know if you want to speak to that. My impression of Gakpo is that he's a very clever player. I think he's a decent player. I know that Liverpool fans feel very frustrated by him, the cut inside and shoot. But, he scored yesterday. I think something I associate with him is having a good eye for goal. He's tall, he's good in the air. I think in a way, and this is probably a really uncharitable comparison, he reminds me a bit of Brennan Johnson, but like a really good Brennan Johnson, someone who just knows how to arrive in the important moment. Lola, I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we're jumping all over the place in terms of agenda. So let's just try and stay on one thing at a time here. But yeah, why don't we just go for it on the transfer front now? So Gakpo, as many of you will know, has been heavily linked to Tottenham all the way through the window. That deal has at points looked as good as done. And, we've all heard that Tottenham, even with the signings of Savinho and likely Omar Marmoush, will still go into the market for another winger. Liverpool, of course, in the market for more wingers themselves. So it's a weird situation to begin with. And then just today, you get news breaking, and it kind of started off small and then escalated to Fabrizio Romano, that Manchester City are interested as well. And as a Liverpool fan, I have to say, off the back of a disappointing result, it has absolutely burned my head out. And I know that doesn't really answer your question about Gakpo, the player, but I'm coming around to it. The point is, Gakpo is a capable Premier League player, as is being proven by the fact that he's being linked to Premier League sides that have a need for goals, and goals in wide areas specifically. It may be the case that he is one of those unfortunate players that is a bit of a jack of all trades and master of none. He certainly likes to play in that left channel and cut inside on his right. He has played, as Neil Caldwell says, he's played off the front. He played in midfield as the most advanced midfielder, and none of those have really worked. So it is true to say that Gakpo has never really, apart from when he's played on the left, nailed down one position. But the fact is, he's wanted by clubs across the league because of that Premier League experience. And I find the idea that Liverpool, with so much transfer business to do, would take away from the team, take away from the current team, to whom Gakpo is crucial and was the best attacker and man of the match against Newcastle. And that is a little bit of an indictment of Liverpool's level, by the way, that was the case. But anyway, it's taking away with one hand. It's the opposite of that give with one hand, take with the other. It's taking away from one hand and giving to a rival. It's absolutely astonishing if Liverpool allow that deal to happen. Cody Gakpo leaving the club should be something that happens right at the end of the window if Liverpool have all the targets that they want, and that would mean 3 attacking signings. But until then,
just jump in. He would be. I think your Liverpool fans seem to feel really strongly about Gakpo, and I feel you run like a runaway train. And I think Interestingly, on Gakpo, we can't really speak to what's going on behind the scenes with these transfers as much as we wish we knew. I think the conversations are being had all the time, and Liverpool will have been talking about Barcola months, years ago even, and Minter the same. It's possible that they have encouragement that these deals might happen, and that's why they're moving on the Gakpo thing, and we're seeing that reported now. I think really what the Gakpo thing tells me is that Liverpool are quite close to signing Bradley Barcola. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I guess. But then these noises about advanced talks and noises about Tottenham have been going on for weeks with no movement. But I think it's more just it speaks to the backwards squad planning at Liverpool that has taken place now over the course of a few windows. That you're in a situation where, look, it was out of Liverpool's control what happened to Alexander Isak last season and what happened to Hugo Ekitike. So there's no blame attached to that. But Mohamed Salah, they chose to let go and knew about letting go of him, whatever it was now. Coming up for 6 months ago, we knew Mohamed Salah was leaving the club, and there is no right winger in the squad. So it's the idea that you're reliant on a player who you don't really like and would be happy to move on, but don't have better options and haven't brought in the other players. It's just baffling and frustrating.
I guess the flip side of that, Lola, though, obviously, is that you've got a new manager in and you are building. And I agree when there's comments in here saying all red runners saying the squad is paper thin. And I think something that surprised me and something that I noticed you said on X the other day was that the team has got weaker over the summer. I mean, inevitably it's going to get weaker if you lose Mo Salah, right? And that's going to make a massive difference to your ability to attack. But I think potentially, do you need to put these things in place because you know that this is a construction, this is a building season under Iraola, and if he is not convinced and Liverpool are not convinced that Gakpo can offer something to them, wouldn't it be very Man City, very thrifty of Liverpool to move him on for a big fee?
I don't agree with that because Liverpool locked Cody Gakpo into a 5-year deal on good wages. He's on upwards of 200 grand a week around about this time last year. And people lost their heads because they thought that was kind of confirmation that he was like a first name on the team sheet type of option. But actually it wasn't. That was about preserving his transfer value, because if everything had gone to plan last season, potentially Ekitike would have taken some minutes on the left. You would have had Rio coming in behind on the left, Isak cementing himself down the middle. Maybe you have Florian Wirtz doing bits at number 9, and Mohamed Salah would still have been Mohamed Salah with a year left on his contract. So you would start to think, okay, maybe Rio has taken Cody Gakpo's place in the squad. So on the one hand, they were setting things up to sell Gakpo for a big fee. But here's the thing. Liverpool actually did do a smart thing to tie Gakpo down to a 5-year contract last summer. So he has 4 years left on his deal now. If Liverpool hold on to Cody Gakpo to benefit them in the short term, even if they don't feel they can build the long-term attack around him, Liverpool will be in a stronger position than if they let go of him. Yes, Ibrahim Mbaye and Rio Ngamoa may go on to be absolute superstar world-class talents, but they aren't yet. So my point is, we don't have to get rid of him now. Liverpool can hold on to him until January and still extract a good fee because of that contract that they've tied him down to. So I don't see the logic in letting a player walk out of the club that has 18 Premier League goals in a title-winning season, right? I do not see the logic of that when you're bringing in Bradley Barcola, for argument's sake, who will not be fit to kick a ball properly until after the first international break. Yankuba Minter, who is injured for 3 months. And then one more, let's say it's Ibrahim Mbaye, complete wildcard young player. It's just, and everything, to go back to the very first point that you made about the show, about churn and continuity and teams that have made lots of changes and are looking around and look different and look weaker, that getting rid of Gakpo would be kind of an ultimate self-inflicted wound, because he is one of the only points of continuity that Liverpool have and one of the only Premier League proven attackers that Liverpool have.
Yeah, and I take that point. I think the point I was making, and we'll end this discussion here and move on into a little more detail about Liverpool's performance against Newcastle, is I guess we don't know the moving parts in the background. And your argument is, regardless of moving parts, Liverpool should keep the continuity of Gakpo. And I guess when everything else is ripped up, maybe it's an opportunity, you know. My feeling about Liverpool, looking at that lineup against Newcastle, and Newcastle too, was, God, I mean, who are some of these players? I don't know who Munoz is. Who's Kumas? I don't know who these players are. Like, and there is a bit of an early season about it. And I do think, you know, normally title-winning teams don't start like this, but there's been many a season where Arsenal have finished in the top 4 and had what I would consider to be successful seasons, having started way off track, especially in the Wenger era. You know, I think about the summer of 2011. Arteta came in, Mertesacker, Benayoun, Park Chu-young, all in this crazy trolley, Andre Santos in a crazy trolley dash at the end of the summer after we'd got smacked 8-2 by United. And I guess I'm struck by, in this era of needing to move so quickly in the Premier League, how many teams have got to this point of the summer in this shape. Because, you know, I look at the Man City roster, I look at the team that started against Bournemouth, and I just think, Rico Lewis, really? I mean, he actually was all right, but I feel like the decision has been made about whether he's good enough to start for City. And the Newcastle team, I mean, they did well against Liverpool, but it was bizarre. And Liverpool too,
D-Select says Morgan Rogers has scored for Chelsea, so that's 2-1 to Chelsea.
Oh, that's really disappointing.
Yeah.
Well,
look, can I just jump in to say, you ask how it happened. And you ask, Lewis Kumas is just a promising youngster that's been around the squad for a while, but he's been on championship loans and done well over the pre-season. So I'm not, you know, I like to have players coming through from the academy. If you had lots of other options, he's someone that you'd be very happy to have around. But you ask how we've got here, and how we've got here is what Jamie Carragher is talking about here on Monday Night Football, which could arguably be Liverpool's worst transfer window. Now, it's harsh, and you know that headline has been taken out to get clicks, and I'm sure it will. But if we just dive into it a little deeper, Alexander Isak, the jury is still massively out on him because of the injury. Florian Wirtz is starting to burn heads out, and there are real questions starting to be asked about whether he's actually suited for Premier League football. Because to me, the Florian Wirtz that I've seen, he just doesn't seem to have that dog in him. And when things become physically difficult, he fades out of games. Hugo Ekitike sidelined through a massively long-term injury. Kerkez has looked lost in a Liverpool shirt, weighed down by the shirt. Frimpong, I still don't understand what type of a player he's supposed to be. He has one extreme attribute, and that's pace. Mamardashvili doesn't look like a Liverpool goalkeeper. He can't kick the ball. And Paul Leone got injured with an ACL injury 71 minutes into his Liverpool debut. So yeah, you can look through every single one of those signings and say massive, massive, massive question marks against them. And as you know, Scarlet, any mistakes in the Premier League, any backward steps, and you will be punished. And this is simply Liverpool getting their comeuppance for some bad decisions, but also some terrible luck for Liverpool.
Yeah, and I think I want to ask you about these players. Obviously, you mentioned terrible luck, and Isak's injury last season was part of that. But I think something that we have to draw attention to, and I have to ask you about, and it's not necessarily something I agree with the criticism, but it was something we discussed last season. You mentioned Florian Wirtz and Isak. Look, it's one game into the new season. They may well have really productive seasons for Liverpool. But at what point do you start worrying about those players? And do you have different feelings about both of them?
Well, look, as Walter White here says, and thank you for the comment, and thank you everyone in the chat for showing up. Walter White says, $250 on our front two, it's not good enough. And I agree with that. Look, Isak and Wirtz have had very little time together on the pitch in their Liverpool careers. I think last season, Isak, Wirtz and Ekitike were on the pitch for 80 minutes total across the entire campaign. So it's really, really hard to judge players. Bless you. Oh dear. Are you okay? Have you dropped? Scarlet's disappeared from such an intense sneeze. I don't know.
Carry on, everybody.
No, I think Walter White's comment is pertinent. For that kind of money, you know, especially Alexander Isak, actually, who has experience playing in the Premier League, it is not good enough.
And I think yesterday, a lot of Liverpool fans, myself included, hoped that he would go to St James's Park and rise to the challenge. They were kicking him left, right and centre. But instead of looking angry, he just looked hurt. And the same goes for Florian Wirtz. I think, you know, I have a lot of sympathy for the fact that Wirtz needs runners to look like a good player, to play football the way he wants to play. And he hasn't had that really in his Liverpool career, players that want to run in behind. But, you know, why did you sign him? Why did Liverpool sign a number 10? Andoni Iraola doesn't play with a number 10. Arne Slot didn't play with a number 10. Jurgen Klopp didn't play with a number 10. Liverpool haven't played with a number 10 since Felipe Coutinho left the club. So it just seems like a really baffling decision to spend that much money on him. D-Select says Iraola hooked him at minute 60, said a lot. So, I couldn't agree more with you, D-Select.
So in terms of the Liverpool setup, because I know that we've been talking about Gakpo and potentially leaving and players coming in, is there a world in which, I know it's been tried a few times, it was tried a few times last season, is there a world in which Florian Wirtz becomes a member of that front line, either plays off the front or in like a false nine position, or comes off the left-hand side into that space in the inside left channel? Is that potentially something that you think maybe that's the thinking behind all of this?
No, I think Iraola plays 4-4-2 as near as damn it. And effectively what you saw between Wirtz and Isak at Newcastle is a front two with Wirtz playing off the striker. And I think if that ends up not being a position where he thrives, there isn't really anywhere else you can put him, because you don't want him in that wide left position where Iraola needs a pacey player who can get in behind, and you don't want him on the right. You don't want him in the double pivot. So that's the only position really that he has where we can, where you can platform him to make an impact. No, I'm really worried. I'm really worried about Florian Wirtz, and it was always going to be difficult at St James's Park. There's a lot of context between the two teams, a lot of water under the bridge. They were going to be angry about Isak. And, we poached Victor Munoz from them. World Cup winner, by the way, in Spain's World Cup squad, Scarlet. So he's not a complete unknown, Victor Munoz.
No, I mean, look, he won you that penalty. He totally passed me by. Can you tell me about him as a player?
He's a very explosive winger that can play on both sides, extremely pacey, very raw, great shot power, kind of like Craig Bellamy, but Spanish.